If you haven't watched the show, scenes like this are the reason you stick with it. Because
yes, Asher's little like was like awful, right? Like it was
this fucking weasel, right, in the COVID face mask, takes his little mask off and goes, actually, I was offended by the joke. I didn't think it was funny. Recently, I did a video called The Cringiest Scene of 2023 talking about the comedy class scene in episode 4 of The Curse, where basically Asher, Nathan Fielder's character, is asked to make a joke without using any words and basically resorts to what feels like an insulting caricature out of nowhere. It's disturbing, it's dark, and it makes you sit in that discomfort, and I thought it was an incredibly effective scene. Imagine my joy when for 2 episodes that encounter basically isn't acknowledged. It's swept under the rug the way Asher would. And in episode 7, we get another comedy class scene, and not only that, but there is way more to unpack. I thought this was a masterful sequence, so let's get into it. Basically, I am going to assume you have seen the scene. I will give you the world's quickest rundown, but just, like, watch the scene, alright? Go on to episode 7 of The Curse, watch the 6-minute scene, but if not, here's a very quick rundown. So basically, Asher, who is a character at this point that has been shown to completely mishandle and misunderstand social interactions to a point where the Reddit fan base of this show is basically speculating that he's on the spectrum or neurodivergent, is going to a comedy class because his wife doesn't think he's funny enough to be on TV. I already mentioned how the first encounter went, just brutal, terrible, uncomfortable, disgusting, but this one is a bit different. This one we see the full class kind of interacting back and forth. Basically, this opens with the teacher going, hey, and basically the comedy teacher goes, hey, a really great form of humor is self-deprecating humor. After a few dumb examples, he goes, hey, Asher, like, there's something you can self-deprecate about, to which Asher goes, hey, like, no, I don't want to, I told you that in private, like, I would rather not.
You were telling me about an insecurity that you have about yourself, and you thought it could be the source of humor, so why don't we try that?
I'd rather not go into...
Okay, well, are you sure? Because again...
The comedy teacher then pushes him on to, like, keep going and talk about what he's insecure about, to which Asher just makes the worst, most clunky joke ever, in which he basically goes, oh, well, you're all telling me to stretch the truth for self-deprecating humor, but there's one thing I wish I could stretch, my penis.
For a joke to work, it's got to be able to stretch the truth a little, right?
Well, there's one thing I'd like to stretch a little bit. My penis.
Well,
look, I get why this joke is dumb, silly, juvenile, and completely tanks. Like, I get it. But I'm also not gonna lie, I was in hysterics at this joke. And I'm not sure if I'm laughing at him or laughing with him. Like, it's so juvenile. Now, the thing with this joke for me is it does make me laugh. It actually does. Like, it got a laugh out of me. I was like, oh, Asher's actually doing well. But the thing is, it's hard to know at this point if any laughs elicited from the audience at home is at Asher's expense or laughing with him. Because, yeah, it's like a juvenile joke and it tanks, right? So then Asher basically is mortified and embarrassed and goes, can we move on? And the teacher does not let him. And this is where the scene gets interesting. The teacher goes, well, no. Like, I know you just bombed, but like, we can figure out another joke here. Like, give it another shot. Asher then does a riff on the joke of like, is that a banana in your pocket or are you just happy to see me? And his version goes, no one's ever going to be confused if I have a banana in my pocket because it's not that big, and also I'm not happy, or something like that.
There's one phrase no one ever says to me, is that a banana in your pocket? Because even if I could stretch my banana, no one would think I was happy.
Okay, well...
Now, the interesting thing about this joke is, yes, it's an absolute tank, absolute bomb, but there's also a little Freudian slip of Asher's deep existential sadness. Like, the comedy teacher was not pushing him to also revel in his own sadness and depression, but that kind of, like, leaked out, right? A very telling moment for Asher, but here's where the scene kind of, like, jumps into, like, amazing territory, because you get this 3 to 4 way fight over this joke that Asher does not want to make. As I mentioned before, Asher repeatedly went, I don't want to talk about my small penis. I told you that in confidence. Like, I don't want to talk about it. The comedy teacher at this point starts to feel like a bully. The comedy teacher goes, no, like, we can get the joke. There's something here right now. Guys, everyone. Asher told me in private that he has a small penis.
Right? I mean, Asher, do you want to go and explain your joke to everyone?
I'd prefer not to.
Well, Asher told me in private that he has a small penis. And I think that is what the joke was supposed to portray.
Yes, and Ash is sitting there like mortified. This genuinely feels like a real life nightmare going on. And it's interesting because in my latest curse video, please check it out by the way, I actually talked about the fact that what the curse feels like to me is just the worst nightmare situations of like people's anxiety playing out. It reminds me of those times when parents go to their kids like, oh, no one's going to be mean, no one's going to bully you for this thing you're wearing or this thing you're doing or this thing. Don't be silly, go. And then they do actually get bullied. You know, when I went to school, I used to be on a singing scholarship, and I remember my mum was like, no, kids are going to think it's awesome that you're in the choir. Kids are going to think it's so cool that you sing. And like, kids did not think it was cool that I was in the church choir. I was hung shit on for like 3 years. The reason I bring this up is because when you see the title, The Curse, you're thinking, ooh, is it a supernatural thing? Ooh, is it like a big, deep character thing? But to me, what the curse feels like it's going is like Asher is walking around feeling like he is consistently cursed with these social interactions. And I saw a really interesting Reddit post where someone with neurodivergency on the autism spectrum was talking about the fact that like, yeah, when I have to do social interactions, I feel like there's this weight behind me. I feel like I'm cursed. I just can't get it right. But the issue here with this scene is it's not just Asher getting it wrong. This teacher is despicable. So at this point, the scene turns. It goes from like a few miscommunications and a few bomb jokes from Asher to the point where the teacher actually goes, yo, Asher told me he has a small penis and like, you know, I think we can figure out this joke. And then this buzzcut lady interjects. And now the interesting thing I find about the buzzcut lady is initially it's her own self-interest. She's just like, I didn't pay money to watch you workshop a masturbation joke with this guy. Like, I don't get why we're still on this. I don't want to be talking about. So I don't want to be in this room watching a boys club unfold in front of me.
Really matter how he phrases it. Can we just move on?
Well, I would really love for this joke to land properly for Asher.
No, yeah, I understand, but I'm asking myself, why am I paying to watch you workshop a masturbation joke? I just want to move on.
But then the teacher pushes back and goes, oh, actually, well, I don't think Asher was trying to make a masturbation joke. Now, to the comedy teacher's credit, I think that's actually accurate. I don't think Asher was trying to make a masturbation joke. But the thing is, she's trying to get to a means to an end, which then slips out when she goes, well, he's clearly uncomfortable. We're all uncomfortable. No one wants to be doing this. Can we please move on?
That is a classic form of self-deprecation.
He wants to move on. I don't understand why you keep dwelling on it.
Okay, what about, even if you rub the genie bottle really hard, you never see the genie?
Stop.
The criticism is now entirely at the comedy teacher. The comedy teacher tried to put it on Asher and go, no, he's just getting the joke wrong. And I think you've misunderstood, lady. But then the woman goes, hey, no, it's not even about whether it's a masturbation joke or wrong. Asher is uncomfortable. He does not want to keep doing this. Neither do any of us. And it's an interesting moment because it feels like a lot of the class is actually turned on the comedy teacher. And the comedy teacher was kind of happy for everyone to turn on Asher, but then he like jumps in and goes, all right, so cool. The joke Asher made has crossed the line. You know, that's not cool, Asher. You need to keep it in the boundaries of respectful comedy. Now, at this point, the comedy teacher is the worst. Now, I saw a few Reddit posts being like, hey, like, I watched that comedy class, and I know normally Asher is, like, kind of the bad guy in this show, but, like, the comedy teacher was really... Does anyone else think the comedy teacher was kind of mean? I'm like, fucking yeah. Like, the comedy teacher was a fucking asshole, and he had so many points to kind of like turn it around or save the situation, but he just kind of kept escalating it and escalating it. Now, I think the thing is, like, yes, was it cool of him to even begin the small penis bit at the start? Not really, but Asher also went along with it. So I'm not too mad at the comedy teacher there for those initial jokes, right? Asher always could have tapped out and be like, I do not want to talk about it. But Asher went, you know what? Fuck it. I wish there was one thing I could stretch, my penis. You know, at that point, Asher obviously wants to retreat. The teacher goes, nah, give it another shot. Asher gives it another shot, bombs again. It's after that. The teacher gets so fucking bad. And so I do want to talk about what makes this scene effective. First off, everyone has been talking about how well shot the curse is, how voyeuristic it feels, how documentary it feels at points. And I think this scene, the way it's shot, makes it so much more effective. It honestly, to me, the way it's framed, Asher as a character, Nathan Fielder, the main character of the show, feels like just a supporting character in an ensemble. When he's presented in the frame initially, you're like, oh, The way it's shot actually makes you feel like you're watching a documentary on comedy or a different show, right? And then when Asher pops up, you're like, oh, there's Asher. Like, it's so well shot because it makes him feel small in his own show in this setting. All the shots are framed in this way where it puts you in the comedy class. It makes you feel like you're actually there watching this awful situation unfold. There's also so much well done stuff in the way it's staged and framed that you can feel who everyone is talking to at different points.
So there's this great moment where the guy takes his mask off and is basically saying that he found Ash's joke offensive. And initially on reading, you can't really tell whether he's upset with the comedy teacher or Asher, but you can see that he's kind of talking to the comedy teacher while also referencing Asher in a different direction.
And I did not think that joke was funny. And I work with victims, and I can guarantee you that joke would not land.
The only way that it is accomplished is by how well it is framed and shot. You know exactly who he's referring to due to the geography of the scene.
Now, I have to give credit to the buzz cut lady, because the thing is, this show, we have watched Asher get ridiculed, dumped on, basically bullied. Later in this episode, he gets bullied by Asher and Dougie pretty hard. And what the teacher is doing at this point feels like bullying. But I have to give credit to the buzz cut lady, because she genuinely goes, you know what? We're going to save you from this situation. And the brilliance of this writing here, because she gets him out of it. She goes, we want to move on. We're uncomfortable. He's uncomfortable. Why do we keep doing it? And then this fucking weasel, right, in the COVID face mask, takes his little mask off and goes, actually, I was offended by the joke. I didn't think it was funny. And as someone who works in the field of victimhood, I think it is entirely sexually inappropriate. And this fucking COVID face mask guy is so like lacking in self-awareness that he doesn't even sit there and go, oh, actually, he never wanted to make the joke and the teacher is the real problem here. What's worse, COVID guy? This misfired joke about him having a small dick, or a teacher using his position of power to make someone talk about their genitalia in a public setting and basically betraying a level of trust they previously had?
I'd prefer not to.
Well, Asher told me in private that he has a small penis. And I think that is what the joke was supposed to portray.
And it's interesting because to me, the COVID face mask guy feels like a Whitney type character, right? Like formative progressive, right? Like, ooh, I work in this industry and you don't, so nye.
And I did not think that joke was funny. And I work with victims, and I can guarantee you that joke would not land.
So good. And the reason this show is so good is because it feels like Seinfeld or something. Remember in Seinfeld, they'd have like one interaction, right? They'd be like, oh, this person made like a weird stink face at my baby. How could they do that? And then for like 20 minutes, people would talk about the intricacies of like social interactions. That's what made Seinfeld so appealing. It reminds you of when you get home from a party and you're like, dude, what the fuck was with that guy? And the thing with The Curse is, are there interesting ideas about gentrification and white privilege and performative activism? Like, absolutely. Are there interesting ideas about eco homes? Like, yeah, sure. Is there an interesting idea about a potential supernatural curse? Like, yeah, absolutely. But I mean, to me, the most interesting thing about the show is sitting there with people afterwards and going, who was in the wrong in this social interaction? Why would they say that? What was the motive there? I think the big takeaway from this scene is, what the fuck was that teacher doing? Right? Because at a certain point, he goes from trying to workshop the joke with Asher to genuinely just being like, I'm going to ridicule him because like I feel big, I feel funny. It is the equivalent of if Asher went, hey, like, you know, how about we make fun of your weight? And he went, oh, I really don't like talking about that. I have a history of diabetes and it's actually really traumatic for me. He went, no, come on, like, make a joke, let's go. And then the moral low that he sings to when basically the class turns on him and goes, can we move on? And he basically gets the out from that COVID guy and goes, yeah, actually, you know what? Asher crossed the line. Asher, that was really bad. We didn't need that from you. Like, totally ridiculing. This teacher is the worst. All right? This teacher is the worst.
This is a learning opportunity. Asher told a joke that offended everyone, so let's talk about this. Okay, Asher, I'm going to be blunt, right? You crossed the line. And, you know, you got to know when you're going outside the boundaries And that's exactly what you just did.
Yeah, don't get it twisted. But then we get the scene afterwards. That scene where Asher approaches him. Again, another great thing about The Curse is when people have freakouts, when people have arguments in this show, it feels so grounded and real to life because they're trying to like argue. They're trying to like arc up and yell, right? The way Nathan Fielder yells in this show is very true to life in a public setting where it's like he's constantly looking over his shoulder. He's being like, you didn't need to fucking do that. And it feels like he doesn't want to be caught having this outburst. It's very similar to the outburst he had at the couple in the car earlier in the show.
If you were really funny, you wouldn't be teaching in a fucking Legion Hall. You'd be on, I don't need this shit.
So the audacity of the teacher to be like, oh, unfortunately, people were made uncomfortable and we need to kick you out of the class. And Asher, rightfully so, goes off. But then, and basically the scene peaks comedically with one of the greatest lines of the show, where Asher goes, you know what? If you were really funny, if you were really a good comedian, you wouldn't be teaching this class. You'd be on YouTube like the good comedians I watch.
I says, I don't need to come back to this. If you were really funny, you wouldn't be teaching in a fucking Legion Hall. You'd be on YouTube like the comedians I watch, okay?
And then storms off. It's amazing. It's an amazing like freak out. It's an amazing argument and it feels well deserved at this point. But the little line about YouTube comedians is hysterical because it still shows that Asher is the butt of the joke, because I don't think anyone thinks that YouTube comedians are the best comedians. And it also feels like a callback. Nathan was taking notes on how to be funny and he wrote be funny and self-deprecating, and then in brackets he had James Corden. Really funny, like really subtle jokes. But yeah, I just think this scene did such a great job of basically being the personification of your worst fears, you know, like I talked about with that choir example before, but just this idea of like parents and friends being like, oh, no one's going to embarrass you, no one's going to bully you, what's the worst that could happen? And this show feels like, hey, like sometimes the worst thing does happen, here it is.
Well, Asher told me in private that he has a small penis.
My late dad was an engineer, and I remember he had to do a speech once to a bunch of construction workers, and my mum was hyping him up, right, to do the speech. She was like, oh, no one's going to make fun of you, you'll crush it, you'll do great. My dad wasn't the best public speaker. There were moments where he used to remind me of Asher in the way he carried himself a bit, actually. But he got up and he did a pretty decent job with a few ums and ahs and stutters, right? And out of nowhere, this construction worker came up to him after the speech and went, oi, just so you know, that was the worst fucking speech I've ever heard in my life. That knocked my dad out for months. And I think the interesting thing about that story and the interesting thing about The Curse isn't just these moments of embarrassment, but it's also like, why does someone do that? What makes someone want to be that cruel? So the reason I bring that up is because what on earth made that construction worker just so bitter and twisted that he couldn't just like go home and laugh to his wife and be like, oh, this guy did a really clunky speech? Like, why did he need to come up and say that? Because if it was bad enough, like my dad would have been told by his boss or something, right? So it's just, it feels like an intentionally mean, cruel thing to do. Similarly, why on earth does the comedy teacher at a certain point in this scene just feel the need to completely blame shift onto Asher, completely ridicule him and just make him feel like shit? Yes, obviously it's self-preservation, but it's also a complete lack of emotional intelligence, which the comedy teacher was saying you need at the start of the episode. No ability to self-reflect, no ability to be like, all right, you know what, we don't always get right, even us teachers, like nothing. He just can't even sit in it at all, and he has to put it all on Asher completely.
No, so the other thing I want to talk about before I forget is the fact that the teacher didn't give an out to Asher in the last episode either. Yes, Asher's little like was like awful, right? Like it was really, really bad. But the teacher then didn't give him like a fake laugh or anything. None of the class did. And it was kind of cruel of the teacher to do, given the fact that everyone laughs at the teacher's shitty jokes. And it's kind of reinforced in this later scene because yet again, the teacher just makes all these hideous, awful jokes and just expects everyone to laugh and then just like will not give anyone else the out or the benefit of the doubt.
And I feel like what we're watching in this show is schoolyard bullying happening to an adult. The scene with Whitney and Dougie later, as I mentioned, feels the same, where they're discluding him and they are ragging on him. And then Doug even has the cruelty after discluding him to then give him shit about the Shabbat situation. If you haven't watched the show, scenes like this are the reason you stick with it, because when you get them, they are so effective at being uncomfortable, and it just feels like you're watching scenarios and situations that no other show would be willing to explore. There is very rarely a release of tension. I thought this episode was fantastic. Thank you so much for watching. I'll do an episode 7 and 8 breakdown or an episode 7 breakdown. We'll see. But for now, I just want to do this scene. Thank you. Have a lovely day.